I have a really good sense for how this complex system is integrated, how the MIDI is kind of connecting with Resolume and how audio is moving through this. But I still don't understand how you've got all your cool projections and all your cool shapes to perfectly align with this sculpture you made. And then, I don't know, I'm still dying to know more about how the content like goes right around those lines and how pieces look like they're inside those little polygons. It's fascinating. So could you talk a little bit about how you configured all this and you set it up?
Sure thing. So step one is easy. Step one is just make as much content as you can that is made for the perfect ideal version of this shape. So if I am looking at this thing, this structure, in a 3D model, under perfect conditions, from a front view, right, it's just going to look perfect.
Okay.
Right? So the first thing I do when I'm making a mapping template, as it's called, is, from a 3D model, is I take it, I get it into a front view, I put it as centered as I can, and then I create a high contrast image, a PNG image that is sort of the reference image for animating.
Okay.
Which in this case would be this one, right?
Got it.
And it's already been mapped to this structure, but if you were to undo all of the mapping and play this on a screen, it would look perfect. The first image,
Yep.
right? So then when you're creating content, it all needs to be reflective of this template. It cannot be bigger than it cannot be smaller, it cannot be warped or twisted. The edges need to be exactly, all of your animations need to be based on these lines and this design. That's because when you're mapping, what you're doing is you're accounting for imperfections in physical space and then kind of moving pixels around. But if you have two images that were made based on different templates and you're mapping to one template, the other one's going to look wonky.
Okay, so like you would like open up After Effects
Yep.
or some kind of video editing software,
Yep.
and you would have this shape,
Yep.
this high contrast thing as
Yep.
like a background, and then I might even go to Illustrator and start drawing lines on top of it that matched this like perfect flattened out thing.
Exactly.
And I would make a ton of video clips in After Effects that just work on that shape.
Yeah, that travel along its lines, that, it could even just be regular content, anything that's just like inside of this hexagon.
Gotcha.
It's not really a hexagon, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is a hexagon. Wow, cool. Yeah, so you just make this perfect hexagon. You make all of your animations based on that perfect hexagon. And then once you put it into Resolume, that's where the mapping actually happens.
Okay.
So every clip that I have in here looks the same. They're not shaped differently. They're all made for that shape. And then that's when the mapping starts to happen. So in Resolume, mapping is a two-stage process.
Okay.
So the first thing you want to do, forget about all of the other video content that you made. This high contrast map is like your best friend when you're mapping.
Okay.
So you're going to turn that on, and let's see if we can do like a little bit of a demonstration. So if I were to start a new mapping, right? I'm going to save this as, because I don't want anything bad to happen. Okay, right? I'm going to add a new screen. And display 2. Can you see how that looks?
It's like not quite lined up.
That is a perfect version of the image. That's what it actually looks like when you beam it against the sculpture.
Gotcha.
So you're like, damn, I have some work to do.
And I see some on your shoulder here. And
yeah,
stuff.
it's like spilling over, it's spilling under, it's
Yeah.
not to form, right? So that's what the perfect version looks like. And then in Resolume, the way you get it to fit is by taking, I don't know, there are many different approaches to this, right? So one approach to mapping, and the simplest approach to mapping, is if you're close enough in real life and your projector's in a really good position and you're kind of there but not quite, you can just take everything that you've made and just kind of pinch corners around a little bit. Or, and you can kind of exponentially change certain corners more than others if you were like mapping down a wall, let's say. But the easiest way to get into projection mapping, and the thing that I find the simplest and most straightforward, is if your object, your sculpture itself, is just composed of polygons.
Okay.
Right, individual polygons. So everything that you see here in this sculpture is a triangle or a square or
rhombus.
They're edges that
trapezoids
connect to each other,
right.
Don't have any other weird thing going on, right? So then in Resolume, what it allows you to do is take those polygons and individually reassign them in space.
Okay.
So like I said, it's a two-stage process. So step one, you start with a polygon. So in this case, in the first phase is called input selection. So you're looking at that perfect model, and you're deciding which pixels from that perfect model do I want to draw from.
So you're like cutting out your individual
You're cutting
shapes.
out your triangle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for, it's going to be the left side of the sculpture. I'm going to go for that top red triangle.
Okay.
So in input selection, I go, click one edge, click the other edge, click the third edge. As soon as you're done, it's going to lock. And if I've done my work correctly, there should be a red triangle somewhere on the sculpture.
Oh, and you just move that around.
So then you can take
up.
it and move it where it belongs.
Gotcha.
Which I can't see right here.
But it's like you would just drag it up to. So you're sitting in the concert venue, and you're looking at the big sculpture, and you're moving around these individual pieces.
Yeah.
And you can grab their corners, and you can just get them all into place.
Yeah.
So
And
for
you can
this
see,
one,
for example, like
Yeah.
the helpful part, like input selection, I think is the hardest thing to understand. It's like the pixels that you're drawing from,
Yep.
right? But ideally, I want this to be just a red square. I don't want any of that green square in there. And you can see in the bottom, there's a little bit of it. But if I were to expand my input selection, to, you know, that's a sloppy input selection.
Right.
That's what it looks like in output transformation.
Gotcha.
And that's no good, right? You want clean lines, colors mapped to colors.
So that's like how many objects you have there? 1, 2, 3,
1, 2,
4,
3, 4,
7.
5, 6 times 2 is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's 16 polygons
Right.
that you map individually.
And so that's you get to the venue, set up your sculpture, and then you take, and you probably have the inputs already done.
Yeah, I just
Right.
like put my Berklee Performance Center mapping up
Right.
there. Obviously it looks bad.
Right.
But then you just take those corners, and the cool thing is you're not just stuck with a triangle in its proportions. You can obviously
Right.
scale it. That's the transform option in Resolume. You can scale it, you can rotate it.
So if you're projecting from an angle or from a weird location, you can still get it to work perfectly on your sculpture.
Or your Berklee Performance Center mapping was perfect, except you just had to move everything down a tiny bit.
Just
you can
slide
do
it
that.
down, yeah.
But really where you start to get a lot of power is in the edit points option. And that's where you have individual
Just grab the
control
corners.
over the corners of your shape.
Gotcha. How long would that take you if you were gonna sit down, or how long did it take you to map this out? You sit down, you just have to do the output transforms for this. How long does it take? Half an hour, 45 minutes?
I would say for something like this, it would take about a half hour.
Yeah,
That
great.
sounds reasonable to me. Something different. Clearly something's missing. I just want you by my side. You were my winter rose. Grip my finger on its thorns, trying to keep it alive. I need you to survive. We'd weather any storm. Used to keep me warm. Now I'm shivering. I just want you by my side. I'm in my final throes. Left my broken heart behind to get on with your life. I need you to survive. We'd weather any storm. Used to keep me warm. Now I'm shivering.